Okay, so we have Danielle, you're there, and I'll just ask you to begin your presentation. I'm going to ask if I'm not sure why I'm echoing. I'm going to ask everybody else to mute them. So, yeah, Linda, I'm not going to mute you because I'm worried about losing you. So if you could just try to keep the chatter down in the community center, that would be great, because then we can just hear Danielle. So
okay,
thanks.
Do you want to do septic system?
Okay, so Danielle, you can go ahead and start by introducing yourself, please.
All right, thanks everyone for joining. I'm Danielle Ward from Adams Brothers in Perry Sound. We look after septic pumping and septic maintenance, septic installations, and septic designs. So we see a lot of septic systems in the area, and hopefully have lots of knowledge that we can share with you. And if there's any questions, if we can just save them for the end, but there will definitely be a question period at the end there. So we'll get started here.
Oh, Melissa, no, you can sit here.
Your septic system and the environment are dependent on you to maintain it. They're not something that we can just leave in the dark and hope that they work forever. They typically aren't something that lasts forever as normal use. Eventually, you would be in for a new one, but certainly, you know, the longevity of your system depends on regular maintenance. And I
think you'll just have to talk over.
Okay, no problem. So first, what is a septic system? So a septic system or a sewage system is your very own on-site sewage treatment and collection facility that is necessary where municipal sewer systems are not accessible or feasible. These systems are carefully designed according to site conditions and Ontario Building Code regulations. The system is designed to collect black and or gray water from the building, separate the solids, begin decomposition, then pass the clarified wastewater to the drain field for the final treatment to be released back into the environment. What are the different types of systems? So there's 5 different classes of systems, and depending on the property of what you have, things might be a little different. Some people might just be with an outhouse or a gray water pit, but so our class 1 is a chemical toilet, incinerating toilet, recirculating toilet, self-contained portable toilet in all forms of privies, or better known as outhouses. A class 2 is a gray water pit. A class 3 is a cesspool, which is not a common thing anymore. A class 4 is a leaching bed system, and a class 5 is a holding tank. Today's presentation is going to focus on the most common system, a class 4 or leaching bed systems. There are 2 different types of class 4 systems. We've got your conventional and your advanced treatment systems. So a conventional class 4 system, they are typically comprised of a septic tank and a leaching bed or drain field. Depending on the site topography, some homes will have a pump chamber that feeds your sewage to either the septic tank or feeds your effluent to your leaching field. So septic tanks typically are 2 compartments inside one tank. A lot of people think that they have 2 different tanks, or which sometimes is the case depending on your site. You might have 2 different tanks that are making up one system for you, but there is a center partition which separates the solids from the liquid side. It's got some transfer holes depending on the tank manufacturer. They might be on different levels in the tank, or they might have a baffle with them, but when the toilet is flushed, wastewater comes into compartment 1, which is your solid side. So the solids settle there and the effluent transfers to compartment 2. And then from out there, it heads to your leaching field. So a lot of people commonly open up their tanks and instantly think, oh boy, it's full. But if you see the levels here, you can see that your tank is actually supposed to remain full. Whether it needs to be pumped out is a different story, and that's dependent on your scum and your sludge level, but there is a normal working level for your septic tank, and that liquid level would be at the bottom of your pipe coming in and at the bottom of your pipe going out. So they are technically full all the time once they're in regular use. So when 5 gallons goes into the tank, 5 gallons will go out into the leaching bed. Bacterial breakdown and fermentation happens inside your septic tank. So baffles and filters. Septic tanks are equipped with baffles for the inlet and outlet pipe. These baffles help to stop the transfer of solids. This is especially important for the outlet pipe so that scum does not transfer to the leaching bed and clog your distribution lines. As of January 2007, all new septic tanks that are installed are to be equipped with an effluent filter in place of the outlet baffle as per the Ontario Building Code regulations. These filters further protect the leaching bed from solids entering and increases the longevity of the system with proper maintenance. So you'll see the top picture there with the blue filter. That's an effluent filter. They are designed to help your system with longevity. However, if they are not cleaned properly and annually, they can plug up and they can cause backups to your home. So that's another reason that maintenance is very important, because a backup into your home could be very costly, but as well, septic tank lids are to be at grade now. So if you have a backup, there is the potential of sewage to leak outside of your tank and contaminate a water source or something like that. The bottom pictures are inlet and outlet baffles. They can be made of either plastic or concrete. Now, we happen to see over time when we're pumping tanks is that the concrete baffles do break down and deteriorate. So if you don't check your system for 5 to 7 years, you have no idea when that baffle may have rotted off and for how long scum could be going out into your distribution lines and plugging them up. Leaching beds. So this is an example of a trench bed with stone and pipe, but effluent from the septic tank travels to the leaching bed either by gravity or from a pump, is evenly distributed into the perforated pipes, leaches into the gravel layer, and eventually into the sand layer. Once this process is completed, the polished water is released back into the environment. Leaching beds come in many different shapes and sizes. Yours may be very different than your neighbor's. Different types of leaching beds include trench beds, filter beds, type A and B beds, as well as shallow buried trench beds. Is it important to remember that when your leaching bed was designed for your property, it was designed for what was there at the time? So if you plan to do any significant landscaping or add any buildings, driveways, you should always consult a licensed septic specialist first. You never want to risk damaging your system. Class 4 advanced treatment systems. There are many different kinds of treatment systems on the market today. Treatment systems typically take up less space compared to a conventional septic system, and in some areas have reduced setbacks due to a higher level of treatment. How to maintain your system. Septic systems are expensive pieces of infrastructure on your property. Protecting and maintaining them is key to avoiding costly repairs or damage to the environment. The absolute first step in maintaining your system is knowing where all the components are on your property. Having knowledge of where your system is prevents you from parking on it, building a fire pit on it, planting trees, etc. So there's very specific setbacks when it comes to installing a septic system, and they need to be met. So that's where if you thought you were going to build a shed down the road, you would definitely want to pre-plan where that might go so that it meets the setbacks so that you're not damaging your system. And a lot of people, if you don't know where your system is, you could have guests and they could be parking on top of your leaching bed and you might have no idea. So
Listen to this about,
No, I'm dish supper, Peter.
well, you know this was gonna come at 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna just mute Peter here.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
all right. So yeah, if you're moving into a new home that's already got an existing septic system, you'd certainly want to either ask the owners that are there or ask for a copy of permit to see where everything is. Now, if you own a property and you're not sure where everything is and you don't have a copy of your system, if you're in McKellar, you can certainly request a copy of your permit from North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority, but definitely knowing where that system is very pertinent. Septic tank pumping. The Ontario Building Code states that tanks must be pumped when the tank has accumulated 1/3 the capacity of sludge. As a homeowner, this is very difficult to judge. Typically, most homes pump every 3 to 7 years, and this is dependent on what goes into the system, the bacteria levels, how often it's used, and many other factors. Your pump truck operator can tell you whether you need to pump more frequent or not. If it's been a while, make the call. So obviously your septic tank's underground, it's full of sewage, very hard to tell how thick that sludge layer is. So when you're getting pumped, if you can be home or if you can talk to your pump operator, that you can ask questions, whether you need to pump more or not, or some people don't have to pump as frequently as they do, but they just like to have their system, go under a checkup for it. So, but we've seen systems that haven't been pumped for 10, 15, 20 years, and the damage that it can cause to your septic bed itself can be, you could be in for a new system just for lack of care of maintenance and pumping your septic tank. So we got a couple of pictures here, just does your septic look like this? Because it certainly shouldn't. So the picture on the left there obviously is very overgrown. And the picture on the right, you can tell it's been driven over many times and it actually now has sewage breaking out to the surface. Proper grooming of the leaching bed is important. Maintain only shallow rooted vegetation and keep mature trees from growing close to your system. Leaching bed pipes filled with roots can cause a complete blockage over time. So, a lot of people think, oh, I have this beautiful area, I'm going to plant a garden here. But if you can maintain just shallow rooted vegetation on it, that is the absolute best thing. A lot of people plant clover if their system is not really in their area of where they want to cut grass, and clover is fine. It's just with not cutting clover, eventually you will have saplings and whatnot grow up over time. So you'd want to make sure that you're pulling those out and that you're not getting any major root systems. So that is a picture inside of one of the leaching pipes that roots have grown into. And eventually that system had a complete backup. So we've got quite a few important tips. Being mindful of water use. Space loads of laundry and showers out where possible and let your system rest. Your system is not used to 5 loads of laundry in a row or every single person taking a shower one after the other. Your system is designed that it's on a daily flow. So when your system is built, it's based on your bedrooms, your bathrooms, the square footage in your home. And there's a calculation of how much water your family or whoever's in your household would be using in one day. So that's throughout the 24-hour period. So if all of a sudden 6 people have a shower in a row, your system, it probably will handle it. However, over time, it's not fantastic for it. And it should definitely be resting once in a while. Like I said, your system was designed for everyday use in the building, not for big parties and family reunions. We hear a lot of people say, well, I only had, 40 people and it was just for the weekend out of the whole year. But with your system being designed for your daily flow, having that many people using your system for a weekend or even a day, typically we recommend rent porta potties, or if you have an outhouse on the property, tell people to use it, because it could be a very costly mistake. We get a lot of phone calls on Saturdays, Sundays, people having big parties and my septic's overflowing and I don't know why, but that's because there are so many people there that you have completely flooded your system. Another important tip is to make sure that your downspouts are not draining onto your leaching field. It's not something that people typically think about, but that added surface water can leach into your system, and now you're adding more water that you didn't realize because it's not coming from your plumbing. You don't want to put pools, campfires, sheds on top of your leaching bed or your mantle area. And when you put heavy weight in one area on your system, it can compact the soils that now can't do the job that they're supposed to. We've seen crushed pipes, we've seen sunken soil. We've seen a whole bunch of things just from people even a big blow up pool, enough water is quite a bit of weight on your system, which isn't good for it. So we recommend not plowing the snow off your septic bed. Some people just like to have that extra parking or the extra place to shove snow in the winter. But doing this, you can drive the frost into the ground. Another recommendation is not to pile all of the snow on your system, because what happens in the spring, once you get the thaw, that is a lot of water that will be leaching into your septic system that shouldn't be. You don't want to drive over your septic system in the winter with snowmobiles. Again, by packing that snow, you can drive frost into the ground. An important thing to ensure is that none of your taps leak or that your toilets continuously run. Excess water is not good for your system. And, a lot of people, oh, I'll fix it next week, or I'll put it on the to-do list. But in reality, we've seen a lot of flooded systems from toilets that keep running or from taps that leak. And, you're up at the cottage, you go home for a couple of weeks and you come back and your septic's flooded and you're not sure why, because nobody's been there. But if the toilet's been running, leaky faucet, that's a lot of water that can be going into your system. You also want to make sure that your sump pump does not go to your septic system. Sump pumps are not designed to be connected to your septic system. Again, a lot of water that's going in there that shouldn't be. Do not park on top of your leaching field. Even we recommend not even parking an empty boat trailer, just because that trailer sitting stationary, you're causing pressure points on your system. Even though it might not weigh a whole lot, it's just best to not park anything on there. And, if you can set up, we see oftentimes people will rope off their septic system if they notice that guests tend to go and park on it. So preventing anyone from parking on there, just because you might know it's there, but your guests might not, a delivery person might not. We've seen delivery trucks that have completely sunk into septic beds. So if you have a way to kind of mark it off, just to let everyone know that this is a very important piece of equipment that's on my property, and I really don't want it damaged, because they certainly are not cheap to replace. So you want to make sure that your septic bed and tank area is always properly maintained and groomed. Like I said, you can get lots of roots in the system, and they can certainly cause some havoc. If you have an effluent filter, you want to clean it annually. Now, some residents do require more cleaning of their filters, just because, it depends what they're putting in their system. We see a lot of grease buildup. We see through fabric softener, things like that will stick to your effluent filter. So really the best recommendation, if you have newly had an effluent filter installed, or you've had a new system and you never had a filter before, is that you actually clean it twice a year. And typically we recommend around the time changes or somewhere around there, just as a reminder to yourself. And then that way, when you go to do the second cleaning, you can tell, okay, I'm good till next spring, or maybe I'm not, maybe we should clean it more frequently. We have seen households that have to clean it every 3 to 4 months, depending on what they have going into it. So if you are looking at your own system, or you're cleaning your filter, or you've had a pump out, anything like that, you want to make sure that your lids on your septic tank are put back on properly and sealed. Now, the older style concrete tanks, they don't have an actual gasket seal on them. So for that, you want to make sure that you're not going to get water running into your tank, whether it be from surface runoff, anything like that. So typically we will recommend, if those lids are at grade, having either some sort of plastic layer or anything to stop water from going in. All the newer tanks now, with either Tough Tight lids or the Polylock lids, they do have a gasket seal on them, but if they're not seated properly, then you're not going to get a good seal on that, and you could have surface water running into your tank. Also, you could have a foul smell coming out of it. If your septic tank lids are buried, you should consider having risers installed. There's lots of different options for retrofit risers, or even whether you want to build a box around them with pressure treat wood. Just when you have your septic tank lids at grade, it's a reminder to yourself when you're cutting the lawn, when you're out in the yard. They're not the prettiest thing to look at, but you do see them. And that way, hopefully it will help you remind you that your system does require care and maintenance. Now, when the system installed, it's actually by the Ontario Building Code that your lids have to be at grade because you have that filter in there. So this will save you a lot of time and effort, you know, if you want to have a look at your system or you got to get a pump out, that things don't have to be dug up. You want to walk your leaching field area occasionally to ensure that there's no slumping of soil, wet areas, excessive grass growth or odors. Quite often we'll get phone calls of, you know, I've got this really green spot in my lawn, but it's not wet. Typically that, if it is, you know, on your septic system, what we will see is that some of the water is starting to come up to the surface, but it hasn't actually broken out to see, you know, the sewage leaking everywhere, just because we've had drier temps or, you know, we haven't had a whole lot of rain. So, you know, if all of a sudden you have a really, really green area in your septic system that you never used to have before, you definitely want to investigate it a little bit. So there's a lot of things not to put down your drains. Typically, we always recommend, you know, if you're dealing with grease, you don't want to put any grease at all in your system. And, you know, you save your spaghetti jar or whichever, and you drain the grease into it. But the next step then is to actually wipe your pans out and try to get as much grease out of there before you wash them. A little bit of grease over time can add up to a very excessive amount. We open up tanks all the time and people say that they're very diligent about dumping the bacon grease or whatever kind of grease it is into a container, but not realizing that, you know, without taking paper towel and wiping it out, that little bit of grease over, if you haven't got a pump out for 5 years, that can certainly add up to a lot of problems. Food scraps are not recommended to go down. Certainly scrape your plates before you put them in the dishwasher or the sink. Any baking supplies such as flour, yeast, or any drier ingredients like that, certainly not a good idea to put down. I'm sure we've all had the baking bowl that we didn't wash in time and it's hardened. Well, the same thing can happen inside your septic bed. Excessive amounts of bleach, heavy cleaners, and antibacterial soap. You know, having a cup of bleach per day, which certainly wouldn't be recommended, but if you were to say do a big clean on the house and you were to use an amount that, you know, isn't excessive, everybody needs to clean things. So it's inevitable. There are cleaning products that are on the market that are septic safe, but there's just certain times that you want to use bleach. And certainly over COVID, everybody was using antibacterial hand soap, which we're not really sure yet if that's affected systems or not. But if you have a healthy bacterial growth in your system, it should have withstood, you know, all the bacterials that went down there. It's just, you know, if you have leftover chemicals or anything, don't just dump them down the drain to get rid of them. You want to dispose of them properly. And the town of Parry Sound does have the hazardous waste disposal there. So if you got old jugs of bleach or anything like that, consider taking them there instead of down your drains. Copious amounts of hair conditioner and fabric softener. These things over time, they do build up in the system. Especially we notice on filters is that they stick to the effluent filters, which is great because then it's not going out to your system. However, of course, not all systems have filters on them. Paints and thinners, not dumping any old paint, anything like that down, but we also don't recommend washing your brushes either. We open up septic systems all the time and you can instantly tell when somebody has either repainted their home or repainted a room and they wash their brushes and everything else out. And now their septic system is blue or purple or whatever color they've painted, not realizing that that can have an effect because over time paint hardens as well. Paper towel, we saw a lot of paper towel during the toilet paper crisis in the pandemic, and it certainly does not break down and it causes a lot of backups. Even we see sometimes guests, you know, if you've got paper towel accessible for people to dry their hands, they'll just flush it down the toilet. It does not break down. And same with Kleenex. You notice that Kleenex is designed for you to blow your nose and not break down right away. So it's the same way when it goes into your system that it lasts for quite some time in there. Condoms and feminine products, highly not recommended to go down the system. expired or unused medications. Those need to be disposed of properly. Coffee grounds, any foreign objects. You would be amazed at the things that we find in septic tanks, from little army men to toy cars. And usually that's a kid that's made an oops, but we've seen t-shirts, we've seen towels, we've seen everything in there that somebody has flushed for whatever reason. One of the biggest factors that we've been running into lately is baby or feminine wipes. The problem is that the packaging says that they are flushable, however, they do not break down. And once they start to build up in the system, they actually can create a mat and, for one, cause a complete backup. But when it comes to pumping the system, they're very hard to get out because they plug the hoses and they almost have to be pulled apart in chunks. So you can imagine that over a couple of years, if somebody's flushing baby wipes or feminine wipes, what kind of blockage that can cause in your pipes and your septic tank. So here's a couple of pictures, really gross, hopefully nobody's eating, but why it's important to be careful what you put in your system. These are pictures of grease buildup over time and main sewage lines to the tanks. So these are the main sewage lines to your tank. So you can only imagine what your internal plumbing of your house looks like as well. And over time, it just creates a complete blockage and it's very, very hard to get out. We see a lot of people will use Drano, really heavy chemicals like that when they have a blockage to try to clear things, but actually you've now dumped a very large amount of chemicals into your septic system and would aid in killing the bacteria that is needed for necessary breakdown. You might be educated on your septic system, but your guests might not be. We always think it's helpful to post signs in your bathroom and kitchen, letting guests know what should not go into your system. And especially too, because there are people from the city that don't even know what a septic system is. So they might come and do their regular routine at your house or your rental cottage or your cottage and not realizing it, but could be damaging your system. Camera inspection of leaching beds. If you have concerns, camera inspections show us how well a bed is functioning, but can also show us why it may be malfunctioning. So the camera inspection allows us to take a deeper look inside and not make costly mistakes with a mixed diagnosis. There could be a simple blockage in a pipe leading from the septic tank to the leaching bed, and it could be a simple fix instead of replacing the whole system. So when we're looking inside with the sewage camera, we can actually see on the walls of the interior of your pipes of where your liquid levels have been sitting. Typically, if we don't see scum layers in there or anything like that, or water laying around, usually your bed's in really good shape. But other times we put the camera in, the bed is full of water at that moment in time, and we can't really see anything because the water is not seeping away fast enough. Other times too, if that happens and we let a bed rest for a while, then the water will seep away and we're able to see whether it's roots in the bed or whether it's just a biomat buildup. And now the biomat is, it's like a sludge. So when the bacteria and your effluent goes out into your septic bed, over time, that bacteria dies and it creates a very thick sludge. And usually it's a slow process over the life of your septic system that's inevitable, but what happens is it'll start building up in the sand layer, and then from there it'll build up in your gravel layer. And once that's plugged up, then eventually it'll build up on the insides of your pipes. So camera inspections are great technology that can certainly tell us what's going on inside your septic system without having to dig it up. Just like your body or your car, it is important to get your septic system inspected periodically by a certified technician. So these are some helpful homeowner resources. These are two websites that have lots of septic tips and information on them. The Ontario Onsite Wastewater Association is dedicated all to sewage systems. And FOCA, which is the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association, has a lot of resources on their website as well. And just there might be a couple points I missed, but there's lots of helpful tips out there, and certainly the Septic Smart book as well. Because if anybody has any questions, now we can certainly start some discussions.
Okay, we have a couple of questions on the chat. I might have to look around at other people's questioning too. So Tricia has asked, I'm worried the ground settled too much over time on the septic bed and might need additional soil added on top to protect those pipes. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it depends. A certain amount of settling is going to happen right after you put your system in, because we can't go and compact all that soil in risk of damaging pipes. So typically you like to see 30 to 45 millimeters of soil on top. But it all depends. If it's settled in kind of a bowl that the lowest point is in the middle of the bed, then you would certainly want to create a crown on top of the septic so that any surface water, rain, runoff is not laying in the middle. But that might be kind of one of those things that you'd have to see how deep the pipes actually are in the ground, because you don't want to suffocate your septic bed either. It requires oxygen to have everything working properly.
Okay, interesting. I think there's another question here. How deep are the pipes that come out of the septic tanks laid below ground level?
So that's one of those things that we have seen anywhere from, a foot to a couple feet. We don't recommend having them a couple feet below ground because, like I said, your bed needs oxygen for everything to function properly. But typically, like I said, if you have 30 to 45 millimeters, that's kind of your cutoff point.
30 to 45 millimeters. Okay. If anybody else has a question, please type it into the chat to everyone. I had a couple of questions. So we had our septic tank put in before 2007. Were there ever effluent filters installed before 2007, or was that a new thing?
They were around. It would have just depended on whether the installer and the homeowner would have agreed to wanted to put one in, but they were not an overly common thing until the regulations came in. And at first, when the regulations came in, they were a 4-inch filter, and they were typically either a red or yellow color. And then a couple of years after that, the industry standard changed to a 6-inch filter. And then as well, the larger tanks you get into, most manufacturers, once you get into either a 7,000 liter or 9,000 liter, then tanks usually that size will have either a 12-inch filter or they will have 2 6-inch filters connected with them, just because the volume of outflow with them. But I haven't seen a whole lot of filters for systems that were installed prior to 2007, unless they had one retrofitted after, which is also something that you can do.
So our system has a concrete lid with a little pull-up. That likely doesn't have a filter then.
Probably not, no, unless somebody had one installed after, but.
Okay, yeah, no, it's just been us, so I know we didn't. Okay, more questions. How close
I'd
can
like
I
to.
Go ahead,
I
Linda.
I'd like to just comment. You can buy this Septo in the stores, and they recommend it putting into your septic. Now, is that a recommendation? And is there any benefit to doing that?
So there's different types of additives that can be put in systems. So it can be a good thing when people do it on the monthly basis, that you're just adding extra bacteria and enzymes, but you really need to be careful reading the labels, because a lot of things will say that they're septic safe. But if you are going to add one, you want to make sure that it has only bacteria and enzymes in it, no other chemicals.
Okay.
And sometimes too, a pump operator might recommend to somebody that they need to add more bacteria to their system. So there are jugs of live bacteria, like Pro Pump, that they're a very concentrated jug of bacteria that you can add. But typically that's, if you're going to put something that heavy in, that would have to be a recommendation from a professional.
Okay. Nick is asking, how close can I plant trees?
So if you know exactly where your pipes are, you have to consider that you might be planting a small tree right now, but what your trees might look like in 10, 15, 20 years. So it depends on the type of tree you want to plant, because some roots, they're like a massive carpet that extend further than the top of the tree. So if you're going to plant trees, I would certainly discuss with, somebody that works at the nursery or anything like that of where to plant them. But you want to keep them at least 20 feet away. But like I said, if those roots spread out larger than that, then you're going to want to put them even further away than your septic system.
Okay. Now, somebody else is asking, Drano can say that Drano is safe for septics, but earlier you said Drano kills the bacteria.
Yes. So if your recommendation from something like Drano or anything like that is telling you to put gloves on because it's corrosive before you dump it into your septic system, that's not a good idea for your bacteria. So like it's like the flushable wipes. They say they're flushable, but they don't break down. So there could be an environmentally friendly Drano on the market that I'm not aware of now, but typically anything like those and the very heavy CLRs, they will kill bacteria as well.
When you add Septo back in, does that fix the situation if you've had to use Drano or not?
There is some Septobac that has other chemicals in it as well. So if you're using a product, there's one on the market, EcoEthic, that it is all bacteria and enzymes. If you're using something like that, it would certainly help, because there is times where you've got a clogged drain and that's your only option. So at least if you're adding bacteria to it, you're trying to help your situation. Certainly by doing one treatment of Drano doesn't mean that it's going to completely kill your system. It's just the recommendations of keeping your bacteria healthy.
Okay. Another question is, our septic bed leads to a steep slope to the lake. That slope has a lot of tall weeds. Is that okay? Can those weeds be removed?
So as long as it's the slope and it's not your actual septic bed, those tall weeds are okay. So that's where knowing exactly where your distribution pipes are in the ground, that's the area that you want to keep maintained. Now, typically your septic system has what they call a mantle, which is a 50-foot sand layer that runs in front of your septic bed, which is most likely the steep slope. So that you want vegetation to help maintain that slope, but as long as those tall weeds aren't on top of right where your pipes are.
So by tall weeds, how would you classify, like the grass on ours grows tall, we have milkweed on there, what's that? Is that okay or no?
I'm not the biggest green thumb, but I have been told that milkweeds, that their roots actually spread out, that they don't go down. Now that's something you'd want to confirm.
Yeah.
But certainly when we see ferns, stuff like that, you definitely don't want those growing on your septic bed.
No ferns. Okay, so we just.
It's raspberry bushes.
Okay.
Juniper bushes are awful.
Good to know. Okay. Would you recommend adding a bacterial culture in the spring into the septic tank?
If it's a cottage and you haven't used it all winter, then certainly adding bacterial culture to help jumpstart your system is a great idea.
Okay, excellent. I know this is another one. I now clean my effluent filter twice per year, but I have had occasions when the water in the second tank was over the top of the filter, and I had to pull out the filter and let the water drain without the filter. Is there any options in this situation?
So in this case, depending what kind of effluent filter you have, sometimes you can pull them up and turn them just a little bit in place. We don't recommend just ripping your filter right out and letting it go. If you can slowly pull that filter out and let it, sometimes it's taken an hour that it slowly will drain. But if that filter is so plugged up, typically then once you actually rip that right out, then you're going to have a lot of solids go out into your bed. So if you can ever so gently pull it up enough that you see that the water will start draining, if you have to walk away for an hour while it does its thing, that's really the only solution that's there, is to just very slowly let it drain and don't fully rip that filter out.
Okay. I'm wondering if you have an older system with a concrete tank and no filter, how hard is it to get a filter system put in? Do you have to replace the whole tank, or?
No, so we are able to retrofit and put new filters in. Oftentimes, depending on how old the tank is, that outlet baffle has already started to rot, so we're able to knock it off. Other times we've had to cut them off, but they are a pretty simple thing to retrofit. We just prefer to do it when the tank's empty.
Right, okay. Let me see. Do spruce trees send out large roots toward a septic bed?
They certainly can. So again, you'd want to keep them a fair distance away from your septic.
Okay. Should a water softener drain into your septic?
So that's a very large debate in the wastewater community. There's been multiple studies on it. There's been reports that say it's safe to, there's been reports that say it's not. Now, it depends. If you've got a very old style water softener that regenerates every single night, chances are that your septic wasn't designed to handle the amount of water that's being pumped into it every single night. Now, mine personally, it's set that it goes off every 4 or 5 days. So it just depends on the frequency and as well as the concentration. So some of the studies are saying that the concentration of the salt and the minerals that are in it are not going to damage your system. Now, we've also seen where systems where the settings are off and the salt content that's being rinsed through there is so high that it's broken down the concrete in the tank within 4 to 5 years. And that was a brand new home that was built because the settings weren't quite right. So I don't really have a full 100% answer for that, because all the studies I've read, it's like 50-50. Some say yes, some say no. So if you have options that it's not going there, great. If that's your only option, then I would definitely recommend making sure that your water softener is not going off every single night, and that a tech has at least looked at it recently and maintained that system of what's actually going out into your system.
So it's the salt going in as well as the amount of water.
Correct.
That's the concern with the water softener. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. I think that I've asked all the questions that were in the chat. If anybody else has a question, you could just unmute yourself and oh, here we go. Here's another question. Did you say that raspberry canes should not be on a septic bed?
Correct. So the root balls that we've dug up in the raspberry bushes, some of them have traveled very far, and the roots on those tend to be very fine. So once they do get into the pipes, they're a very fine root that create almost like a mat that can stop the water from going through them, especially once they make it into your pipes. They now have a lot of nutrients to feed those roots and for those roots to take off.
Okay. I was also wondering about hair. I use hair nets in the drains for the showers and whatnot, but I would think that wouldn't be a good thing to have go in the septic.
No, we've seen some pretty big hair falls in septics. I mean, when you have a filter, when I've never cambered a bed where I've actually found a hairball in the leaching pipes, but certainly pumping tanks, we've seen quite a bit of hair in them.
Okay. Okay. Did I miss anybody's question? If I did, can you just unmute yourself and ask it? So somebody, Supoff, is saying milkweed have tap roots. Oops, I can't see the end of it.
Not a good plant for on septic beds.
Okay. Where's the rest of that chat?
Good to know.
Not a good plant for on septic beds. Oh dear. I was so excited by my milkweed. Okay, anyway.
I suggest grass or clover, then you're safe.
Grass or clover. Okay, got it. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. Anyway, I think that
Nope. Go.
oh, Tricia's saying thank you, and I want to say thank you as well.
You're welcome.
That
Thank
was
you.
really a wonderful thorough talk on septic systems, Danielle, and we really appreciate you coming on to let us know about it. It's a question that there's an issue that affects absolutely every household in McKellar Township. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And yeah, like I say, any more questions, and then my email is there. If anyone's got any private questions, by all means, send me an email and we can discuss further.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you to everybody who came in to attend. We're going to continue. I'm just going to stop the recording now. We're going to continue this meeting now.